And welcome to Hannity, and we're coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona. Wow. For the entire hour, we'll be joined by 2016 Republican presidential candidate, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. We obviously have a large audience watching the program tonight. They are here for an event that was put together by the Super PAC, Keep the Promise. We have a lot to cover in minutes. Voters in this great state of Arizona head to the polls on Tuesday to pick who they want to be their party's nominee. You ready to get things started? All right. Joining me now, 2016 Republican presidential candidate, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Wow, what a welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Sean, and I got to say, I love the great state of Arizona.
All right, I have been saying now for a while that this is a two-man race. You agree with me. Donald Trump agrees with you and me. Why is John Kasich still in this race, and what are your thoughts about it?
Look, there's no good reason. When you go 1 for 27, that's a problem.
Good point. That's a problem.
And at this point, it is clearly the voters have decided it is a two-man race. It is between me and Donald Trump. We are the only two candidates with any plausible path to win the nomination. And at this point, Kasich's role is essentially as a spoiler. A vote for John Kasich is a vote for Donald Trump.
I interviewed Governor Kasich, and in free fairness here and openness, I've known him for 25 years. Okay, I heard you. I've known him for 25 years. But he has no mathematical chance to get to 1,237 delegates. Donald Trump obviously does, and you obviously do. So the question, he said to me, well, Sean, it's going to be exciting if we have a big fight at the convention, and I don't think that's going to be exciting. I would suspect, if it goes to the convention floor, it's to either rob you or Donald Trump who get the most votes, the most delegates. Am I right?
You're exactly right, and what you're mentioning is the nutty fevered dream of the Washington establishment, that they want to see a brokered convention where the convention is deadlocked, and suddenly they parachute in some establishment choice who didn't even run, but is the white horse to save Republicans from the pesky voters. That ain't going to happen, and if they tried it, you would see an absolute revolt, and quite rightly.
Senator, I'm going to be honest with you. If they try that, I'm walking out. Are you all walking out with me? All right. I won't put up with that either. That's not right.
It's not going to happen. There are one of two scenarios that's going to happen. Number one, we have a very direct path to 1,237 delegates, to winning the nomination outright, and that's what we are campaigning hard to do. If you want to beat Donald Trump, and listen, I agree with the 65 to 70% of Republicans who say if Donald Trump is our nominee, it's a disaster that Trump loses to Hillary and we lose the whole country. But if you want to beat Donald Trump, the way to do it is beat Donald at the ballot box, as we have done over and over and over again in 9 states all over the country.
So this is really important. Let me go through the scenarios. If you go to Cleveland and you have more votes and more delegates, or Donald goes and he has more votes and more delegates, and they try and steal it from either one of you, both of you united, I know this is an odd question, but the two of you can stop any of the baloney.
Of course. And so there are two scenarios I think are likely. One, that we win 1,237 delegates before the convention and wrap it up. Right. Now, there's a second possible, which is going into the convention, neither Donald Trump nor I have 1,237 delegates, that we both come in with a ton of delegates, but short of 1,237. Now, in that case, you don't have a brokered convention. You have a contested convention, what we saw... 76, Ford and Reagan. And there, the delegates decide, and they decide between me and Donald Trump. That's actually democracy. It's the elected delegates voting and following the rules. And I'm willing to live by those outcomes. But by the way, the Washington establishment folks that are hoping for Kasich, you know, part of their plan, the only way, Kasich is not even eligible to have his name put in the nomination. You have to have won 8 states,
8 states, right,
in order to be eligible. And so their plan is the week before the convention, have the Republican bigwigs change the rules. And that doesn't make any sense. We need to trust the voters, and I trust the voters, and that's why our plan is to beat Trump at the ballot box.
All right. Let me ask this question, and I think it's important. At the end of the day, I don't know if you read social media like I do. You all read social media? It's really ugly right now, because at the end of the day, the real battle is going to be for the White House. The real battle is, do we want another term of Obama, which Hillary promises? Okay? So my question is, are you confident? I know it's very testy and tight between you and Trump. It's the nature of politics, unfortunately. It's a blood sport. But at the end of the day, are you confident, Senator, that there will be one nominee and a united party that will stand together to defeat her, whoever it happens to be?
You know, Sean, I am confident, although I will say, for that to happen, what we are working to do every day is unite and bring together Republicans. And some of the way you see unity, it depends on how you campaign. If you campaign engaging in constant insults and attacks, if you just yell and curse and belittle others with personal attacks, that makes it hard. That makes it hard for the party to unite. It's the reason why on those debate stages, when we've seen candidates yelling and insulting each other, I don't get into that mess. I don't get into that muck. I don't insult anyone. I keep my focus, and if they insult me, I don't respond in kind. I keep my focus on substance and policy, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many Republicans are uniting behind our campaign.
The math is really, I'm not so sure if this is the best way to pick a candidate in the end. I mean, you have one rule in one state, another rule in another state. It just so happens Arizona is a winner-take-all state. Here are the numbers where we are. You have 423 delegates. Trump 678. John Kasich fourth at 143, which we've been talking about. You need 78% of remaining delegates. Can you get that number outright? Because you're saying you can. And
yes.
How do you get it?
So let me walk through the math. Let's start with Trump. If Trump continues to get delegates at the same rate he has so far, he doesn't get to 1237. He needs 54% of the delegates to get the nomination. So far, he's only won 47% of the delegates. So he's got to do better than he has. And the problem for Donald, every time a candidate drops out, he does worse because the supporters for those candidates, you know, Marco Rubio dropped out this week. Marco is a good, talented, inspirational person. He's got who he inspired. And that's a real problem for Donald because the overwhelming majority of those Rubio supporters have come and are supporting us. And so we keep getting stronger and stronger. Now, you're right. For me to win 1237 delegates, I've got to win 78% of the remaining delegates. That sounds like a high bar. But you got to remember the delegate allocation rules, which is if we beat Donald going ahead by even a small margin, if we consistently beat him in the overall vote, we get north of 80% of the delegates. And so that's the path to winning, is going and winning over and over again. For example, we've got Arizona and Utah both voting on the 22nd. Now,
Tuesday.
Utah, we've got a big, big lead. We're going to have a very good night in Utah. Arizona, it's much tighter. Donald did well in early voting in Arizona. We're surging now. Our numbers are going up and up and up. And Arizona, it's all going to come down to turnout. If enough people come out on Election Day to counterbalance the early voting numbers, then we can do very, very well. And I got to tell you, 2 weeks later, the state of Wisconsin, we are poised to have a terrific night in the state of Wisconsin.
Let me ask this. It is kind of amusing, and maybe it's actually not amusing. You know, I noticed that Lindsey Graham gave you a half-hearted endorsement. But, you know, this is a guy that said, well, if anyone ever shot Ted Cruz on the Senate floor, they wouldn't be convicted if the trial was in the Senate. He also went on to say, you know, other not-so-nice things. John McCain, right here in Minnesota, called you a wacko bird. Here's what I want to know. Is it that why haven't these people stood up and fulfilled the promises that they made to repeal and replace Obamacare? Why did they not fulfill the promise of 2014 that would stop executive action on immigration? Why do they not seem to understand what's going on this election cycle? They seem like mystified. Oh, the people aren't listening to us anymore.
Well, Sean, that's why I'm here in Arizona and not on the Senate floor. Listen, people across this country are frustrated out of our minds. We're frustrated and we're angry because politicians keep lying to us. In both parties, they make promises, and then they go to Washington, they do the exact opposite of what they promised. And that rage, I understand. There are millions of us who feel betrayed because we have been betrayed.
I feel betrayed.
For good reason.
Do you feel betrayed?
And I think the reason why our campaign is seeing so much enthusiasm from the grassroots, so much passion, is if you're looking for someone to stand up to Washington, the natural first question is, okay, who has stood up to Washington? You know, who's taken on not just Democrats, but leaders of their own party? And I will say, listen, Donald Trump did a masterful job of tapping into that anger. And I get, if you're ticked off at Washington, Donald is an angry, screaming, yelling, cursing voice. That feels like a natural vessel for that anger. But if you're upset at the corruption of Washington, you don't solve that by supporting Donald Trump, who has been enmeshed in the Washington corruption for 40 years.
I tell you what I want to do. Before you came out, Senator, I had an opportunity to talk to the crowd. I love you too. We have 95 million of our fellow citizens out of the labor force. 50 million Americans in poverty, 46 million on food stamps, and you see girls like this adorable little girl on her daddy's shoulders over there. You know what? We've doubled the debt, and she'll spend the rest of her life working to pay it back. When we come back, I want to talk about your plan to solve the nation's problems. All right? We're going to take a break.
Excellent.
We'll come back. We'll continue. It's Hannity. We're on the road. We're in Phoenix, Arizona, ahead of Tuesday's big primary. Thanks for being with us. We're in Phoenix, Arizona, as we are joined on the campaign trail, Hannity on the road, with Senator Ted Cruz for the entire hour. Senator, the state of Arizona knows probably as well as any other. I know, I heard you. Probably knows more than anyone else, as much as anybody else, maybe California and Texas. I've been to the border at least 10 times. Yeah. All the way from the Rio Grande straight across to San Diego. I've been to drug warehouses. I've seen gang members arrested. I've been on horseback, helicopter, all-terrain vehicle, and boats. It's a bad problem. We're paying trillions on our educational system, our criminal system, and, you know, all across our healthcare system. How do we stop this, and what do we do with the 11 million people here illegally?
Well, Sean, you're right. We have, with our immigration system right now, the federal government is doing a horrible job of securing the border. It's utterly failing. I started the day today down in Douglas, Arizona, on the border, touring the border. I got to tell you, the border fence, what little fence there is so dilapidated, is so ineffectual. You've met my daughters, Caroline and Catherine. My 5-year-old, Catherine, could climb that fence in about 3 seconds flat. I mean, it literally... So we were there with a bunch of reporters. We're down on the border. The reporters decided, you know, the camera shot isn't good enough here, so the reporters jumped over the fence from Mexico to get a better camera shot. So they literally crossed illegally into Mexico.
Yeah.
And they just jumped right on over it. And it is an absolute travesty. I mean, we are seeing, I met with ranchers down on the border who described, one woman who's a rancher there described how apparently one of the drug coyotes had been monitoring her and watching her, and she hides the key somewhere outside, and he found the key, and she 3 different times has come home, and he has let himself into her place, he's showered, he's made himself a meal, he's slept, washed the dishes, and then locked the door and left.
Was it like the 3 Little Bears?
It is... And every rancher there, they all say they don't lock their doors because people break in every day. They're facing the threat of that. They don't break in every day, but every day they face that threat. Every day they see coyotes, they see drug dealers coming along, and the Border Patrol is not on the border. They're pulled into the interior 35 or 50 miles north, and they're not securing the border, and we know how to solve this. When the media says we can't solve it, what is missing is the political will. Barack Obama and the Democrats support illegal immigration.
But you're 100% right. I think the Democratic Party looks at a new voting base for them. But also,
yes,
the Republicans haven't built the fence either. They want cheap labor.
It's both parties are failing. Democrats, there's a new politically correct term for illegal aliens. It's called undocumented Democrats. And they just view it as, we want more votes, let people in illegally. Yeah. But Republicans are almost as bad. Republicans, far too many of them, are in bed with Wall Street and the special interests and the lobbyists and big business, all of whom look at illegal immigration as cheap labor. And so you have both parties failing.
How fast could you build the fence and totally secure the border?
We will start on day one, the very first day in office. I will rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action Barack Obama has done. So that is day one. Going forward from there, we're going to build a wall. We're going to triple the Border Patrol. We're going to increase fourfold the fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft so we can monitor incursions. We're going to end sanctuary cities, and we're going to do that by cutting off federal money. If you're a sanctuary city, you no longer get any taxpayer dollars. We're going to put in place a strong E-Verify so you cannot get a job without proving you're here legally. We'll put in place a strong biometric exit entry system for visas, and we will end welfare benefits for those here illegally.
Last question on this topic. Big controversy about what do you do with people that are here that didn't respect our laws and sovereignty. What do we do with them?
You enforce the laws, and what the laws provide is if you're here illegally, you're deported. If you or I crossed over into Mexico, they'd deport us. They'd send us back. That's what sovereign nations do.
No, it's actually worse than that. You know, if somebody from El Salvador, Nicaragua, they go into Mexico, they're put in jail and they're sent back immediately, and then Mexico lectures the United States.
Every nation on earth enforces their immigration laws, and they expect America not to do that. Listen, we welcome legal immigrants, those who wait in line and follow the law. But this is a national security crisis. It's a law enforcement crisis. And, let me mention, Donald Trump has made immigration central to his campaign. And yet, Donald Trump, for 40 years, has been funding open border Democrats. The Gang of Eight amnesty group. Donald Trump funded the Gang of Eight. He gave over $50,000 to 5 members of the Gang of Eight. And so he talks about immigration a lot, but listen, anyone who has funded open border Democrats for 40 years doesn't get to suddenly say they're going to secure the borders. And the amazing thing is, it was publicly reported that just a couple of months ago, Donald Trump met with the editorial board of the New York Times, and he said, everything I said on immigration, I don't believe it. I'm not going to build a wall. We're not going to deport people. Now, there's a tape of that meeting. And Donald Trump refuses to release the tape. And I got to say to the voters, if you're fed up at politicians lying to you, if you're tired of being betrayed, Donald Trump is telling us and telling the New York Times he's lying to us. The difference is, as president, I will secure the border and we will end illegal immigration.
We're with Senator Arizona. It's Hannity on the road. Stay right there. Senator, I had a chance before you came out to talk to this great audience, and one of the things I said is it's so sad to me that so many Americans out of work, in poverty, on food stamps, and we've doubled our debt. How quickly, if you became the President of the United States, can you fix these problems, get people to work, out of poverty, stop this record spending and deficit spending? How do you do that?
We can start solving that immediately, and that is my number one priority, both in the Senate and as President, is bringing back jobs and economic growth. Because economic growth is foundational to everything else. And we've seen for 7 years the disaster of the Obama-Clinton economy. We have the lowest percentage of Americans working of any year since 1977, and wages have stagnated. I'll tell you, the reason I'm campaigning, the people I'm fighting for, are the single moms who are working 2 and 3 part-time jobs, who've had their hours forcibly reduced to 28, 29 hours a week because Obamacare kicks in at 30 hours a week. The people I'm fighting for are the truck drivers and the plumbers and the mechanics, are the union members, the men and women with calluses on their hands, who've seen their wages stagnate year after year.
Median income is down thousands for the average American family.
The young people here, we're at a university, young people coming out of school with student loans up to their eyeballs and scared, am I going to get a job? What does the future hold for me? That's who I'm fighting for. That's who this is about. Now, one of the reasons I'm so optimistic that we're going to change course is right now people across this country recognize that the Obama-Clinton economy is a disaster. Now, it is easy to do what Donald Trump does, which is yell about it, but you got to actually have solutions to fix it. I'll give you an example. If your car is sitting in the driveway and it won't run, you don't want to bring in a guy to stand in the driveway and yell and curse at the automobile. You want someone to actually lift the hood and fix the engine. And the key...
But that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
For example, there's corporate inversion. Yes. Trillions of dollars overseas, but high taxation prevents companies from bringing the money back. We have more natural gas, more energy than the entire Middle East combined, and we're so stupid we don't tap into that resource and create the jobs and get the energy lifeblood of our economy.
The heart of the economy is small business. 2/3 of all new jobs in America come from small businesses. If you want to have the economy take off, you got to take the boot of the federal government off the back of the necks of small business.
Regulators.
Tax reform, regulatory reform, and sound money.
And you support a flat tax.
So if I am elected president, we will repeal every single word of Obamacare. It's the biggest job killer in America. It is hammering small businesses, and instead we'll pass common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable.
Reagan in 8 years created 21 million new jobs.
Yes.
He doubled the revenues to the federal government. It was, at the time, the longest period of peacetime economic growth. I think the concept of that seems alien to people.
And young people don't know we can do that. Let's take, for example, African Americans. Under African Americans, median income in African American families under Barack Obama has dropped about $500 a year. Do you know under Ronald Reagan what median income in African American families did? It rose over $5,000 a year. I mean, you want to talk about changing the lives of those who are struggling, and you do it through regulatory reform, repealing Obamacare, reining in the EPA, pulling back the federal regulators that are killing small businesses, and then tax reform, passing a simple flat tax and abolishing the IRS.
All right, we got to take a break. We're in Phoenix, Arizona. We have 2016 Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz for the hour. When we come back, we have a few surprise guests and much more. It's Hannity Live on the road, and we're glad you're with us. And welcome back to Hannity. We're in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. Hannity on the road, and we continue with 2016 Republican presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz. And he brought along a couple of his friends. We have Hewlett-Packard CEO and presidential candidate Carly Fiorina is with us. This man is the former governor of the great state of Texas. Now, this is a great story. If they didn't create 1 million jobs in Texas, the first 4 years of Obama's presidency would have been negative job growth in America, sadly. Rick Perry is with us. Governor, good to see you. All right. Carly, I had an opportunity to see you a week ago. The campaign is changing every day. You're out on the road with Senator Cruz. How do you feel?
I feel good. I feel like Republicans are starting to understand what's at stake here. Yeah, you know what's at stake here. And, you know, I'm not saying this, but there's signs right up here that say, dump Trump, choose Cruz. I don't know. Kind of a good slogan. See, we actually need to put a constitutional conservative in the White House. And the reason that's so important, you know, sometimes people think the Constitution is some old... The Constitution is about... The Constitution is not just about protecting our individual rights and liberties. It's also about preventing the concentration and the abuse of power. We have too much power. Too much power concentrated in the hands of too few. Too much economic power, too much political power. This is a man who will challenge that system and restore a citizen government. Only Ted can do that, because guess what? Donald Trump is the system.
Carly,
he's going to preserve the system.
I got to give you a lot of credit because look, I got to know all 17 of you in the course of this process. And I was amazed how well you prosecuted the case against Hillary. Extraordinarily effective. And you're going to be a powerful voice in this campaign. Governor, you and I have been friends a long time. Good to see you.
Good to be with you.
You and I were down at the border together, and I sat through an intelligence briefing that Barack Obama was supposed to go to with you. And in an 8-year period, you and I heard that 642,000 crimes were committed against Texans because of illegal immigration. Wow.
Yeah, what we saw today, we were down on the southern border of Arizona with Mexico, and this, I know a little bit about this border issue. For 14 plus years, had a 1,200-mile border between Texas and Mexico, and we know how to secure that border. And the fact of the matter is, you can't give it lip service. What we've heard out of Donald Trump is he said, we're going to build a big wall. It's going to be beautiful. It's 30, make it 40 foot. Who'll make it 45? You know, it sounds like an auctioneer. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to secure the border. But there's only one individual that is consistent in the constitutional belief that it is the federal government's responsibility to do that. I want to deflect just a second about this constitutional issue and why Ted Cruz, intellectually and spiritually, in his soul, knows this Constitution so well. He has been spoon-fed two checklists in his life, and he lives his life with two checklists every day: the Bible and the United States Constitution. And that's what I want in the White House.
Governor, let me ask you and Carly a question I asked the senator earlier. There is a huge divide that kind of frightens me a little bit within the Republican Party now. I want to know from both of your perspectives, and if the divide continues, I would argue that Hillary becomes the president. That would be a third Obama term. You are two very strong, powerful voices in the conservative movement today. Are you both confident that at the end of the day, when the fight is over and the battle is done, a battle both of you were involved in for a time, that this party comes together, unites with the purpose of defeating Hillary Clinton?
You know, first of all, Ted Cruz can and will unite this party. And you see it happening now. You see more and more people coming over and saying, yes, Ted Cruz is going to help us take our party back as well as our country back. But, you know, I just want to reflect on something. It's interesting to me that Donald Trump wins in open primaries. When Democrats and independents come over and vote and he loses in closed primaries, I thought it was Republicans' job to pick our nominee. So, conservatives of Phoenix and Arizona, Republicans of Arizona, pick a nominee who will unify this party and restore constitutional principles to the White House.
Yeah, well, really, Carly, you were spot on. And we are at a time between now and, I would say, the next 45 days of which this is going to be decided. And so I'm very comfortable that the people of Arizona are going to do what you need to do, because this is a winner-take-all state. The work that you're going to do between now and that primary day, Tuesday, is going to make the difference. California is going to be a winner-take-all state. I'll suggest to you it may come down to just California. And if it does, I'm very comfortable that we're not going to have a contested primary, that we're going to win this thing straight up with 1,237 of those votes and get this thing done now. And then all of those people that want to see this country headed back into a powerful economic position, militarily, spiritually, morally, they know that Ted Cruz is the one individual that can take America back to greatness again.
Let me ask you this. Are you worried that the establishment is pushing, like John Kasich's in the race, but he mathematically has no chance? Are you worried? Well, John Kasich said it would be, he told me, I interviewed him, he said it would be exciting. Do you suspect, as Politico pointed out today in an article, that the establishment has plans to take the winner and put them aside and put a, quote, consensus candidate and usurp and disenfranchise the voters? I really believe that talk is going on.
Well, let's just review. The establishment has gotten it wrong over and over and over again. After 2012, their analysis of the situation, the establishment that is, was that we needed comprehensive immigration reform, we needed to stop talking about social issues, and we needed not to rock the boat quite so much. But guess what? All of us said, actually, we have to secure the border. Actually, we have to stand up even more for life and religious liberty. And yes, ma'am, let's rock the boat, which is exactly what Ted Cruz did.
Governor?
And many of you know that I spent time as a pilot in the United States Air Force, as the governor of the state of Texas. I was the commander-in-chief of the Texas National Guard, of our Texas military forces. I have a real passion for our veterans. We have a group called Keep the Promise to Vets, and that's where I spend a lot of my time and my focus. And when I can't tell you how important it is to our men and women in uniform to have a commander-in-chief in the Oval Office that respects the Constitution and the laws of this country. When Donald Trump made the statement on the debate stage that he was willing to go well outside the bounds of what those who look at the Geneva Convention and talk about, that he would use acts of torture against individuals on Islamic terrorists. And the fact is, every man and woman in the military shivered when they heard the next thing out of his mouth when he said that, oh, those people in the military will follow me because I'm going to give them that order. We must have a president of the United States that respects that Constitution, that respects those men and women in the military, and that individual is Ted Cruz.
We have about 30 seconds, Senator. We'll let you have the last word.
Well, let me just say, the key to winning this primary and the key to winning the general in November is unifying Republicans, unifying Americans. I'll tell you, it is an incredible honor and privilege to be sitting here with two extraordinary leaders like Governor Rick Perry and Carly Fiorina. Both Carly and Governor Perry have inspired millions. They are principled conservatives, and their standing together is indicative of what we're seeing in this whole campaign, which is Republicans are all coming together, the 65 to 70% of Republicans who recognize that nominating Donald Trump is the same thing as electing Hillary Clinton, and if we continue uniting Republicans, that's how we win this nomination, and it's how we win the general.
We're in Phoenix, Arizona. It's Hannity on the road. We continue with 2016 Republican presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz and much more straight ahead. Stay with us. And welcome back to Phoenix, Arizona. It's Hannity on the road. We continue the full hour with 2016 presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz. You know, we've talked a lot about the border and immigration. It's such a big issue here in Arizona. Somebody that knows this personally, Steve Ronnebeck, is with us. When was it that I had you on the show? How long ago?
It was about 6 months ago.
Yeah. And you want to tell the story, the tragedy that you experienced with your family?
Well, back January 22nd, 2015, Grant was working the overnight shift at the QT. Man came in, wanted to buy cigarettes, dumped a jar of change out on the counter. Grant was counting the change and evidently wasn't counting the change fast enough. The man said, "You're not going to give me my change?" And Grant tried to explain to him that he had to count the change first. The man pulled a gun. Grant immediately offered up the cigarettes. He did everything he was supposed to do. The man shot him point blank in the face, then stepped over his body, grabbed 2 more packs of cigarettes, and walked out.
And you found out about this person?
The next day, or the same day, as the day went on, we found out he was an illegal immigrant. He had been arrested prior for rape and burglary and was able to plead it down to felony burglary. Spent no time in prison. 2 years on probation, and within a year killed my son. He had 2 orders of protection against him, 2 trespass warrants, had pointed a gun at somebody else. We actually had a Mesa judge that had written a letter to ICE and said this man is dangerous, and yet he was free to walk the streets to kill my son.
That is so disgraceful. Senator, I want to give you a chance to respond. And by the way, I know I speak for everyone here. You're in our thoughts and prayers. That should never happen to any American family, period. Senator, we've got a little less than 2 minutes in the show. I want to give those 2 minutes to you to make your final pitch and to obviously address Mr. Remenai.
Well, listen, Steve has faced firsthand the consequences of our failed immigration system, the consequences of a federal government that doesn't enforce the law. That murderer should not have been on the streets. He was a criminal. He was a rapist. He should have been in prison for those crimes. And when he got out of prison, he should have been sent back home and deported that day. And not released to prey on American citizens. And Steve is a member of a club that no one on earth wants to ever be a member of. It was an involuntary criminal act. And I'll tell you, as I've campaigned, I've gotten to know people. Kate Steinle's family in San Francisco, where their beautiful young daughter was murdered again by a criminal illegal alien who'd been in and out of jail, and the federal government refused to enforce it. In Texas, the Pena and Ertman families who were murdered by illegal aliens, horribly assaulted. We need a president who enforces the law, and Sean, I give you my word as president, I will enforce the law. We will not be releasing criminal illegal aliens.
Senator, did you all have a good time, Phoenix, tonight? You had a good time? Senator, you've always been very generous with your time. We really appreciate it. And I think I speak for everybody watching and everybody here. Steve, you're in our thoughts and prayers. That has to end and never happen again. We really thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. It needs to end now.
listen, now you have a whole program that's coming up, right? So I got to say goodbye to our Fox audience. I want to thank all of you here in Phoenix. Thank you for coming out. They have a big program coming up. That's all the time we have left right here on the Fox News Channel.